You are listening to the Push Media Podcast Network.
This is good shit.
Greetings and salutations. Assalamu alaikum. Shabbat shalom. Hugs from the honeys. Pounds from the roughnecks. See my man Sage that I knew from the project, said he had beef, asked me if I had my piece, short dude, 222s in my shoes. Welcome to the Colin Coyle podcast. Where else are you going to get that kind of greeting? When I went to college, one of the biggest mistakes I guess I've made in my life thus far, something that was funny and I always appreciate it, was the cafeteria room. All of the employees were through Aramark, I believe, or for the sake legally of this next 10 minutes, we'll call it Baramark. But these employees were all people that clearly had spent time in, jail for a slew of crimes. But they were people who were turning their lives around. And instead of getting fed the state-sponsored burgers brought to you by the company that caters privately owned prisons, they are now working for that company on the outside, making something, I'm assuming, below minimum wage, because legally there's some loophole that they can't make more. Point of what I'm getting at is the people who worked in the cafeteria at college spoke in a very, very specific way that was like, you could tell they thought this is what was cool right when they went down in the hole. Like, there was this one guy, Raul, who, regardless of the meal, just happened to be serving whatever station you were at. And he would just greet you with like, "What's up, man? Peace in the Middle East, blessed in the Middle West. You want some turkey?" Like, it was just smooth shit. It was kind of like this combination of BET Comic View and Def Jam poetry. And that's just, I guess, what was going on in my mind when I decided to open up with a line from Party and Bullshit. Because I don't really understand how to start things. That's really, I guess, what is to be learned here. Something else that is to be learned, and something I learned that is valuable but sometimes difficult to do in your personal life, is admitting when you were wrong. Admitting when, hey, I thought something that with the benefits of a moment's distance has changed, is not correct anymore, and I am willing to admit I was wrong. I am, of course, talking about the last episode in which I spoke rather glowingly about Mr. West, Kanye West, being ahead of the curve in terms of 3D chess being played. I spoke rather glowingly in reference to Kanye wearing the White Lives Matter shirt because I thought what he was doing was innovative and satirical and borderline genius, because I thought what he was doing was mocking the word magic that goes on with slogans that come to represent very nuanced schools of thought. I believed all of that up until I found out Kanye decided to go DEFCON 3 on the Jews. My bad. Seriously. Big mistake on my part. Hey, not co-signing that. I have a show that at some point will need to be embraced by Hollywood because the numbers will become undeniable. I mean, at a certain point, you just can't turn away 7, 8, 9 billion listeners. I don't even know if there's that many people on the planet. That's how fast we're growing. But what I'm saying is I can't go with Kanye that far out. You know what I mean? My bad. I don't want to call the guy genius anymore. But what I will call him, and what I think we've all accepted and known about him, is the fact he is someone who has mental illness. He is bipolar, literally, and medicated for it. In fact, whenever he comes off his medication, it becomes news. He ends up hospitalized. So maybe keep that in mind also when you see him talking about going DEFCON 3 on the Jews. Now I understand what I just said. Towards the end of it might have sounded a tad bit unpalatable. DEFCON, not a good use of that word right there. I don't know why Kanye's decided this is the third time he's going to go DEFCON 3 on the Jews. Where is the first 1 and 2? And Kanye, in typical Kanye fashion, he at first kind of makes the exchanges that follow after expressing a random thought no one asked him to express. The exchanges that follow are typically at first pretty funny. It's funny. So, let me read you verbatim what Kanye said that initiated the destruction of his career, hopefully, or hopefully not. We'll see. He tweeted, "I'm a bit sleepy tonight, but when I wake up, I'm going DEFCON 3 on Jewish people." One more time for everybody. Quote, I'm a little bit sleepy tonight, but when I wake up, I'm going DEFCON 3 on Jewish people. Now, you never want to go we know the second half of that sentence is not good. But what is, in typical Kanye fashion, you got to admit, it makes you chuckle. I'm a little sleepy tonight. I want everyone to know. I'm tired. I'm not at my best state. I don't really feel this enough to do it right now. I'm a little sleepy. I got to get some sleep. But when I am well rested and with a clear headspace, then I'll go DEFCON 3 on Jewish people. Now, this is in response to, for some reason, Kanye claiming that Diddy is controlled by Jewish people. Whether that is true or not, I'm not even going to walk down that road because it's not. But that's why this is an entertainment show, not the news, even though I am talking about things that happened. Anyway, so in a text exchange with Kanye, and if, by the way, if you're a famous person who is, kind of friends with Kanye West, why would you ever text the guy? Is it not a sign maybe pick up the phone and call? Because he just posts every text message you will ever send him. In fact, this is what he said to Diddy himself. Anything you text, I will post. I love you, and you guys are breaking my heart. I accept your apology in advance. I'll do it one more time because, again, are these the ramblings of a genius or someone who is admittedly in prescribed medication for bipolarism, or both because it usually is? Quote, anything you text, I will post. I love you, or you guys are breaking my heart. I accept your apology in advance. Again, this is crazy. It's not good. You never want to go DEFCON 3 on Jewish people, but Kanye still manages to do it in such a funny way. I love you. And I already accept your apology in advance. That's like remember when Kanye got in a beef with Wiz Khalifa on Twitter and he made like 17 points and he started literally going with and 17th of all, my man pulled up with 17 points. His brain works in a way that allows him to think this is normal for me to say, and 17th of all, this is someone who has bipolarism. It is a mental disease we know a lot about. It is a mental illness. He is medicated for it, and when he's not, it becomes TMZ news, and he becomes hospitalized. Again, you don't want to go DEFCON 3 on Jews. But I am asking the question, how much leniency, hear me out, are you supposed to have for the guy who we know is suffering from mental illness? A mental illness, mind you, which causes sporadic bouts of mania. On top of living the life that is Kanye West and creating a cycle of success for you that literally requires controversy. How much leniency, how much empathy, how evolved are we supposed to be in reaction to these types of things? Because I would just like to point out, Kanye's now been deplatformed from everything. He literally went and joined Parler, which is literally the FBI's social media platform for people too stupid to realize they've just joined the FBI social media platform. Kanye's fallen down a bad path. He's been, dare I say, radicalized. Almost like that YouTube commercial about a year ago where they're like, do you know a loved one who's been radicalized online and just has views you don't like hearing at Thanksgiving? Rat them out to the Gestapo. I mean, Google. Kanye's slipping, but are we as a fan, not even a fan, just an onlooker, a spectator, should you have any sympathy for a guy who's clearly going through one of the things that we know is attached to the illness he has? Fair question. Because I'm just saying, it seems like we pick and choose our mental illness battles here. Mental illness is very important when, how do I put this? Mental illness is a cause everyone wants to champion when a gymnast doesn't want to do interviews because the backflips tuckered her out. Kanye was sleepy, but he still went DEFCON 3 on the Jews. I'm just saying, where do we draw the line? Mental illness is a very fashionable thing to say and label and identify that you have. And of course, it seems like it's really only, recently stricken gymnasts or swimmers. It seems like it's been something that has only affected people who participate in sports no one already gives a shit about unless it was for the Olympics, so they should really fucking be grateful anyone's watching once every 4 years. You swim in a pool or do a backflip. There's other sports. You should be thankful anyone wants to ask you a question about, hey, what was it like swimming in the pool? How did you manage to do that tumble roll? But when it comes to the mental illness that becomes a little messy or a little less simple or, dare I say, real and legitimate, it becomes a little touch and go for people, because it becomes difficult to stand behind a guy who says, I'm a little sleepy, but when I get my beauty sleep, when I'm fully well rested, then I'm going to go DEFCON 3 on the Jews. It's very, very difficult to stand behind a guy like that, still love a person who says something like that, because we know they're suffering from something that makes them say wild shit. That literally is the cause of them talking nonsense, going off on another episode. We know that. It's documented. In fact, we are so well aware that this guy has that he has medicine for it, and it's made news whenever he goes off of it. And if he's still a person, and people who have bipolarism, their episodes, it's not like you're just going to... listen, there is no mental illness that just... There's no Tourette's of anti-Semitism. No one just becomes suddenly stricken with vocal diarrhea and anti-Semitism directed towards Jewish people. That's not a real thing, obviously. But Kanye is a visual learner. Let's put it that way. He is in an environment, and this is a difficult point I think I'm trying to make, but he's in an environment where he gets told no a lot. He gets told no a lot by infrastructure, by really powerful conglomerates, monoliths, because all he wants to do is break into industries that do not really want to have someone like him, for very good reason, might I add. If I am in charge of like Armani or Gap, I'm not particularly prone to giving $1 billion to a guy who, once he gets well rested, going to go DEFCON 3 on Jewish people. Jewish people who may make up, a large majority of the board at this company. Who's to say? All I'm saying is I can see where Kanye can just esoterically try and grab these thoughts, definitely bad, not good, and string together all of these things floating around in his head that lead to a narrative, unfortunately, of anti-Semitism. It's certainly not right. It's wrong. He is not correct. Kanye is flat out wrong. But you know what was also wrong? The former governor of California going on a tour of Auschwitz and signing the guest book, The Terminator, I'll Be Back. Maybe don't make a joke about, death camps in Germany. That's wrong too, especially when you're fucking Austrian. You can't even say I'm bipolar, if being Austrian is a mental illness to be determined later on. Kanye's wrong with what he's saying, but what I am saying is I can understand how someone who has bipolarism in his very, very unique, specific position in life, with the people he interacts, the perceived enemies he thinks he has, I could see how he ends up interpreting the world around him in a way that, unfortunately, he's blaming on Jewish people. Now, Kanye, what he said was deplorable and wrong and disgusting, but he got deplatformed swifter than a motherfucker. A lot quicker than, say, Louis Farrakhan did. That's a point worth, pointing out. Louis Farrakhan has never claimed to have any type of mental illness. In fact, he's one of the fucking people who are so confident in themselves, he thinks he communicates with God for you. He's never claimed to be bipolar at all once, and he was on Twitter for several years talking about Jewish people are rats who need to be exterminated. That seemed to be tolerated for a very long time. And he is not sick. He does not have the excuse. If Kanye went on trial, and if this was like murder, he has a very legitimate chance at pleading insanity and not getting the normal, consequences for doing such. I'm no judge, but I should be, and I know what's best. But I'm just saying, Farrakhan had a much longer shelf life on Twitter. Why is that? And he certainly probably thought, dare I say, a few degrees worse than the things Kanye said. And may I ask, how many albums has Farrakhan put out? How many classics has Farrakhan put out? How many Through the Wires has Farrakhan put out? The answer to that is none. So, and I know two wrongs don't make a right. Whataboutism is, not something you want to stand on or lean on and not a strong point. But one guy we know has a illness that makes you talk wild shit. One guy thinks he communes with God, claims to be very confident, and says much, much worse things about the same group of people and had a much longer shelf life on all social media platforms. It kind of seemed like they kept Farrakhan on Twitter as long as they could, kind of as like a way to like appease the left, because for some reason the left is very much in bed with Sharia law and Islamic states. I still don't understand how that happened. And then just when it got too much and the culture shifted too far away from that, then they got rid of him. But it seemed, seriously, look it up. Farrakhan was on Twitter until 2018. So what's that all about? Kanye said one thing about going DEFCON 3 okay, still, you see what I mean, though? It feels a little like, maybe maybe there should be some sympathy for the guy who is clearly suffering from the illness we know he has. It seems like people don't know how to really deal with mental illness when it gets sloppy, when it gets messy, when it's not, made up like you're on the Olympic team for some sport no one gives a shit about, and you should be thankful anyone wants to ask you a question about it. Because I guess it requires work. I don't really know why. But another example, and a much more extreme example of this problem I have identified, is, let me take you to the state of Belgium, okay? Now, Belgium is a country that probably you don't know much about, and why would you? It's Belgium. But Belgium is part of these countries, these Northern European countries that we hear so much about thanks to Bernie Sanders, who tells us all about these great social nets there and the welfare state, and everything's provided for you and everyone's so happy. And then even a little bit of thinking, if you're not a complete idealist moron, is like, well, that's able to happen because it's a very small, homogenous population that really doesn't exist as a socialist state. Their entire economy is like a capitalist free market, but there's just so much money and so few people, we can make everything work. Not to mention, it's cold as fuck, everyone eats blubber or some bullshit, and there isn't really a reason to be happy here, hence some of the highest suicide rates in the world. That's a fact. There's just literally not a lot of sunlight. These great places Bernie Sanders loves to tell everyone about. Now, in Belgium, here's what happened. Now, if you're familiar with euthanasia, it's not a charity for children in Asia, which I thought for an embarrassingly long amount of time. I'm talking towards the very, very end of my teens. Euthanasia is the act of legally killing oneself, medically, because for a slew of reasons. Now, this episode's not devoted to discussing that topic or breaking it down, because like most topics, the answer's a little bit of both. It's not I can much easily wrap my head around someone who's 97 and has emphysema and cannot breathe without swallowing blood. I can understand why euthanasia might be the call there. I don't think any religious belief. Now, obviously, religious beliefs are you can't kill yourself, but I just feel like whatever God you subscribe to would probably be all right if that is the case. You know what I mean? I think he would get it. I mean, there's a difference between stubbing your toe and, scratching an itch with a shotgun because, you're past due on a bill, or not being able to breathe without swallowing blood. I get there's a range to it, but what I don't think there's a range to, and what I think is really, really fucking concerning, is the psychiatrists of the state-sponsored medical system, I might add, in Belgium, have deemed a girl, unfortunately, too sad to ever get better, so we're just going to kill her. You know what I mean? That's what we're going to do. A 23-year-old woman named Chanty de Corte in Belgium was deemed too sad and incapable of recovering from the PTSD she was experiencing from witnessing a terrorist attack in an airport in Brussels. Now, she was in the attack that killed 32 people, which is obviously a very traumatic thing to experience as a person at all. I know very few people who could probably go through something like that and then go to sleep that evening. But I know a few of them, and they scare the fuck out of me. But most people, I understand that being something that will warp your brain to the point of making regular life much, much more difficult to live and exist in. Now, because we are an evolved world and not a tribe full of cavemen who are living by the flow of the buffalo or whatever the fuck, we have psychiatrists, we have psychologists. Now, I know I say psychology is a field of study made up completely, but I say a lot of that in jest, even though I believe it. But it should exist because the alternative, apparently, at least in Belgium, seems to be, can't cheer up, we're gonna fucking kill you. That shouldn't be allowed. Now, there were the psychiatrists who were, of course, medical professionals in a state-sponsored medical system in Belgium, and not saying that's bad or worse, but just a fact you should keep in mind. They, instead of thinking, hey, we are psychiatrists whose job it is to take people with mental illness, PTSD being one of them, as is bipolarism, and there is medication we know about that helps people with these things. I say this in a cadence very specific because are you fucking kidding me? What are you doing killing her? Instead of, being psychiatrists and psychiatrizing, definitely not a word, they instead said, let's not try Zoloft, let's try euthanasia. Okay, we're not dealing with like Jackie Kennedy here. The solution can't immediately be, well, take out the part of her brain then. What the fuck? Does this scare no one? And also, Belgium, let's just not be tinfoil hat crazy people. First, let's just ask, Belgium, are we to say that you no longer believe that PTSD or depression are mental illnesses? Because the act of just euthanizing someone who you deemed incapable of ever recovering from, is that not acknowledging the disease is there in the first place? Or are you just saying, no, there is no mental illness, this is just a person who's too deficient. This is just a person who just can't become of normal productive levels, so they gotta go. That feels like we are not people anymore, at least according to the government of Belgium. Point one, I would like to ask. Now, the second point I have for the people of Belgium, the second point I have for the Stella sippin' simpletons of Belgium is this. Why, in the sweet fuck, are psychiatrists not even bothering to do their actual job? How did psychiatrists become the executioners? How did this happen? I don't really know what the term is for the person who works in the prisons that like actually physically administers the IV that sends you sayonara. But I think that's a specific title. I don't think their title is psychiatrist. That's a question. I'm wrong. I'm asking. I don't know. Is that their word? I don't think it is. Psychiatrists, in my mind, aren't people who have black hoods and, let the guillotine drop. I thought they were people that wrote prescriptions on tablets. What the good sweet fuck. And, all right, let's get tinfoil hatty, because that's just what I do. And again, I'm not the news, but everything I have talked about is real and has happened. Here's my conspiracy. These states that you hear Bernie Sanders talk so much about are so wonderful with their giant social nets where they take care of everything and no one really wants for anything. That's because there is a certain amount of money they have and there is a certain size population they have. Now, in order for everything to keep happening, those numbers need to keep balanced. We can't ever have the population get too high. We can't ever have the money supply get too low. Now, there are ways to keep the money supply from going up and down. But there are those same type of ways that are much more grim to keep the population from going up and down. And when the government controls every part of your life, vertically integrated from every medical function to every, apparently dopamine hit your brain has, it becomes very easy for them to also make sure the population limit never gets too high or low. I'm just saying, walk with me on this thought. Now, if you are one of these states that provides everything in life, you also need the small population to be a certain base level of happy, productive, chipper, go-lucky, not really killing the vibe, happy to be here, Stella sipping simpleton, You need every type of person to be at the very least this certain level of willing to accept these standards. You need everyone in your population to have a certain level that they have in order to be comfortable, and you need that level to be relatively consistent. Now, anyone who is not finding the level provided to them satisfactory, anyone who just seems to be a tad bit blue, a little down, kind of just killing the mood, killing the vibe, instead of having people whose job it is to help people mentally get to the correct level, to be functioning, to be base level happy, instead of having that, it is much easier, I will admit, financially speaking, it is far more pragmatic to just, fucking kill them. Literally kill them. Kill them. Kill them. I'm going to stress one more time. Kill them. A 23-year-old woman. Nothing medically, physically wrong with her. She had a lot mentally wrong with her. She was suffering from PTSD because she witnessed something traumatic. Survivor's guilt, I'm sure. Also, just seeing physical violence on that level is something I don't think people understand how that will affect them. Especially a 23-year-old girl from Belgium. What the fuck are you seeing in Belgium? I actually don't really understand what is my perception of Belgium, because they're not like Dutch people, I don't think. But they're all like, part of my brain thinks like Belgium are like giant bass rootin' kickboxers, and then part of me thinks they're like, mushroom and weed shops and where you just eat cake and go to open mic poetry. But then another part of my brain thinks like Belgium's like where organs are harvested. So I don't really know what to make of that place. But I will say that those countries up there, highest suicide rates in the world, some of the least amount of sunlight ever, apart from like Alaskan towns that are taken over by vampires once a year. It's not the best living environment anyway. And yet Bernie Sanders keeps telling everyone it's wonderful. And people start to believe it. And sure, the conditions might be wonderful if you're someone who fits the very, very broad criteria and very, very low level that is, oh, I'm a happy person. All of these conditions are meant X, Y, and Z, I'm happy. Now, if all of the same conditions were provided to everyone in America, I'm sure a lot of people would not be happy with it. They'd be like, this is not enough. Now, if you were someone in Belgium who thought this is not enough, and that thought stays in your brain and it just starts to drag you down and you're just, like I said, killing the vibe. Or if it was for something much more legitimate, like you witnessed a fucking terrorist attack, carnage, violence, shit like that, and you were, suffering PTSD from it, not unlike, say, a soldier getting home from war. It's very similar in this instance. Rather than therapy, medication, literally going to a medical professional, talking, any other course of action besides fucking killing yourself. And another thing that is dark about this is it's not like she had PTSD and was so mentally sick and ill that she thought the best solution is I need to take my own life, and she just did it. She just, sleeping pills, shotgun to scratch an itch. Shout out Ernest Hemingway. What was in fact happening, she had the thought that fucking scares the shit out of me. I am so sad, and it will never get better. I'm going to go, what was the order of events? Like, did she go to these psychiatrists and explain, I'm so sad and depressed, I don't know what I'm going to do? And she asked to be euthanized? And these medical professionals, who you would perceive to be people who probably took the Hippocratic Oath, said, I prescribe you the long sleep. Or did she walk in asking to be killed, and these people said, I'll kill you? It's so fucking dark to me. Like, if you're so sad and suicidal, but then to be rational enough to, instead of, do the act then, go find some representative of the government or the medical system and say, hey, do this for me. Holy shit. You're keeping a clear enough brain to not do the worst unspeakable, something you can never take back. But you're finding the rationale to still wait long enough and think, I need to be sensible and go to the government because this is how you do it. This is protocol. When someone's this sad, it is normal to go to representatives of the medical system sponsored by the government here in Belgium that everyone loves so much because it's free. It's normal when you feel this way to go get killed there. Like a deer who was hit by a car and didn't die. It is literally humane and proper when someone feels this way to go get killed by the government. And I have some news for you, my friends. The government, as you get older, unfortunately, you'll find out, does a bunch of things that make you feel bad. They ask for money all of a sudden. The voting, it becomes hard to register how to vote. Maybe you got your license plate stolen and you want to kill anyone who works in a DMV because it shouldn't take 6 weeks to get a new one. The government will fuck with you, pick and prod, and really make you sad. It'll annoy you. It might send your son or your daughter off to war. It might conscript your father. There's things that the government can do that will cause people to be mad, hence the Oklahoma City bombing. Or not, who knows? Look into it. Expect people are going to piss you off. Expect some of those people to be the government. Your solution to that will never be, I hope, man, I'm so sad, I should go see the government about being sad. And the government's like, we can't have people being this sad. We have a status quo to fulfill. So in order to keep the population and the money levels where they need to be, you got to go. Now, that is a symptom of mental illness is, falls under PTSD or vice versa. Sorry, I said that backwards. As does bipolarism, that Kanye West is clearly displaying when he says, I'm going to go DEFCON 3 on Jews. Now, I don't think Kanye's going to go DEFCON 3 on Jews, because really, I don't know what that means. I don't think he wants to cause physical violence. I think he's a guy who speaks in hyperbole. I think he's a guy who has literally bipolarism, and I think he's a guy who's probably off his meds and recently got divorced and had to watch his wife fuck a talentless Neanderthal who slings Taco Bell breakfast. I could see him being a little peeved. I could see him being in a bad headspace. And immediately, and I know it might sound silly to some people who still have some of their brain left, but being deplatformed, especially if you're a public figure, is a big deal. You are literally censoring someone. Now, most people in their life will never really truly know what it is to be censored. That's something that doesn't really happen because most of you are fucking stupid and you don't have ideas worth censoring. But a few, but a few of us do, okay? A few of us have been censored. A few of us are currently being shadow banned by fucking YouTube, okay? Now, when you're a public figure, not saying I'm on Kanye West's level or Kanye's on mine, when you're deplatformed, it is you're muzzled. And someone like Kanye, who prides himself on expression, that's maybe the worst thing that can happen, especially if you're already bipolar. If you are perceived and you feel like you can't speak and you have a mental illness that sometimes make you say crazy shit, any second you have to say any type of expressive thought out into the world, you are going to seize that moment and go DEFCON 3 on Jews, apparently. But Diddy, I love you, and I already accept your apology in advance. That is still fucking hilarious. But it's mental illness. How much sympathy are we supposed to have for it? Because mental illness is something everyone cares about in like NFL commercials or wants to talk about when a gymnast is tired of taking interviews after doing a backflip once every 4 fucking years. But there's also mental illness that becomes sloppy. It becomes difficult and hard and dangerous in a sense to like deal with and stand behind someone and support someone who's suffering from it. Because it's much easier to say, instead of why do you want to go DEFCON 3 on Jews, it's much easier to just deplatform that person, to just say, you know what, this person's talking crazy shit. Whether they're sick or not, be damned, it's just easier to not hear it. Let's just get rid of them. We can't have that. Let's cancel them. It's gone. It's much easier, rather than going through the trials and tribulations of what antidepressants or SSRIs will help a 23-year-old woman who suffered and survived a terrorist attack. It's much easier, rather than figure out which medication will help her, live a more productive life. It's much easier than scheduling therapy appointments once, twice, 3 times a week to discuss how you feel and how you can, overcome these feelings. It's much easier than doing all of that, especially in the state of Belgium, where the money supply is very specific and we can't pour all of our resources into one person because we have a large group to take care of. Everyone's treated the same, even though your events that you go through in life are specifically very fucking different. Disparate as a motherfucker. I'm talking some people suffer a terrorist attack and live and some don't. It's much easier. It's much, much fucking easier, just like it is to deplatform Kanye for literally suffering from bipolarism rather than talking to the guy. It's much fucking easier than treating a 23-year-old girl who had nothing physically wrong with her, who was literally, by the grace of fucking God, lucky enough to survive a terrorist attack. It is much easier in a state that Bernie Sanders says is great, that controls everything from top to bottom, that makes the conditions for happiness so specifically low and not specific to any person at all. This is just one size fits all. And if it doesn't fit you, if you're bringing down the vibe, if you're killing the mood, we're not going to treat your mental illness. You don't get special treatment despite you actually being a specific and special person. That doesn't work here. That's not in the budget. That's not how we keep it working here in Belgium. We're a bunch of Stella sipping simpletons who find it much easier as psychiatrists to kill people than do our job. Mental illness it's harder to support and fix and treat. It's harder in every regard, I would imagine. I'm not a medical professional, but I understand the Hippocratic Oath, so I'm at least better at it than fucking doctors in Belgium. Mental illness is harder to treat than any physical illness because you can't really see it. You can do brain scans, yada, yada, yada. This is science that exists, apparently not in Belgium, but you get my point. It's hard sometimes because mental illness is expressed as behavior. It's not like you have lupus and you start looking like Vladimir Putin, or you have a compound fracture and there's a bone sticking out of your body. We know what's wrong. It's harder to stand behind someone who's sick, but the expressions of them being sick are, thoughts that involve anti-Semitism, are someone in Belgium just bringing down the vibe, never really seeming to just smile again because they had to see a terrorist attack. And if you are a government, if you're a place that is very specific with the amount of money you need to keep it all running, it becomes much, much easier to say all of the medical, treatment we provide our people, the whole half of it that involves the mental illness, the whole side of the spectrum that's hard to see, difficult to treat, involves your brain. That's nuanced. That's difficult. That's hard. There's science for it, but we're not really going to dig into it. It's much easier to keep the train rolling here if we just kill you, if we just do that. If you don't treat mental illness as just as serious an illness as any other physical ailment your body can have, the government's not going to. People love to say mental illness is stigmatized, and it certainly is, but I would argue it's stigmatized by the medical system. it's important to remember mental illness is mental illness. It comes in all different shapes and sizes, and it's displayed in a whole set of ways. And it's very important to remember it's different than just being fucking stupid. But when it can be pinpointed to something as specific as someone suffering PTSD from witnessing things you are not supposed to, maybe the reaction we should have is, hey, why did you tweet that? Why do you think that? Have you been taking your medication? Are you okay? Hey, tell me about what happened, the feelings you're experiencing. It's not your fault. Are you on medication? Come talk to psychiatrists rather than get euthanized. Maybe have a little more sympathy for mental illness. It's easier to deplatform and kill someone, but I thought the goal isn't to deplatform and kill people. If Kanye didn't make Through the Wire and lived in Belgium, that would have been his last album. Keep that thought in mind.